Hi, this is Reverend Peter Friedrichs from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County in Media, Pennsylvania. Over the course of the next 6 or 7 minutes, I'd like to introduce you to the basic principles of Unitarian Universalism. Many people are attracted to Unitarian Universalism for the freedom that it offers. As a non-creedal faith, we don't tell you what you have to believe to belong. But this doesn't mean anything goes. We have principles which guide our thoughts and deeds. I'd like to think of our faith as a wide highway. We're each traveling this road free to drive as fast or as slowly as we'd like, in whichever lane we want. But even the widest highway you've ever seen has guardrails that show the limits. You can think of our principles as the guardrails of our faith. There are 7 core or historic principles of Unitarian Universalism. At the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County and some other UU congregations, we've also got an 8th. One thing you'll note about our principles: they're couched in terms of actions and behaviors. We are called to, quote, affirm and promote each principle. The principles describe the ways we're called to behave and to act in our congregation and in our lives. The first principle tells us that every person has value, just the way they are. Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive faith that tries to make room for everyone who is willing to subscribe to our principles. Our second principle calls us to treat each other fairly. Because we all have value, we must work to create a more just and equitable society and world. Bending the moral arc of the universe toward justice is a big part of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. Building off our first principle, our third principle reminds us that we're on this journey together and that we need to help each other grow spiritually. Through our relationships, we come to understand our place in the world and wrestle with the big questions like, why am I here? Next, we find what many consider to be the most important principle of our faith, the one that says we will engage in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Notice that it says free and responsible. A responsible search is one where we share our beliefs and understandings with each other, but we don't impose them on each other. Our fifth principle reminds us that our congregations are democratic institutions and that we must be active in the democratic process of our society. That includes advocating for the rights that we believe in. The sixth principle reminds us that as part of the larger world, our freedom is bound up in the freedom of others. We work together to create a world of peace, liberty, and justice. The last of our historic principles is near and dear to the hearts of many UUs. This principle reminds us that we are all connected to each other, to all living things, to the world. What we do matters, and what affects one affects us all. The seventh principle is an affirmation of our need to work to protect the environment and a statement about how we are in relationship to each other. In 2019, UU-CDC adopted the 8th principle. This principle says that we are committed to dismantling systemic racism and white supremacy. It calls us to be actively anti-racist in our relationships, our congregation, and the wider world. We cannot build beloved community without working to abolish racism and other oppressions. Now, we don't expect folks to remember every one of our principles. You'll never be asked to recite them from memory. But several years ago, the Reverend Richard Gilbert gave us an image that might be helpful, and I've modified it just a little bit. We can think of the principles as an arch with 2 pillars and a keystone that holds it together. One of the pillars is our first principle, the inherent worth of each person. It's about the individual. The other pillar holding up the arch is the 7th principle, the one that says we're all connected in the interdependent web. So one pillar reminds us that we're valued as individuals, and the other reminds us that we are all related. Every arch needs a keystone to hold it together. In this image of our principles, the fourth principle is the keystone. We engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So to put it simply, we are individuals bound up in relationship on a spiritual journey together. Finally, we have my one modification. This arch is built on the ground, the foundation, that we are committed to being actively anti-racist and anti-oppressive, working to build the beloved community. So, there you have it, a brief overview of the core principles of our faith. As I said, you don't need to memorize them. Hopefully, as part of our congregation, you've seen our principles in action. We do our best to live them out every day as a community of faithful, meaning-making, justice-seeking people.